Welcome in, everyone, to Lively Lewis Stories.
That's right, we're back with even more awesome adventures with Levi and Ivy.
Set your storytime meter to fun and get ready to join the Lively Lewis crew.
All you need is your imagination and...
Off we go! I can't wait to see where our story takes us today.
Have you ever wanted to get more Lively Lewis in your life?
Well, we've got you covered.
Grab an adult and zoom over to livelylewisshop.com.
Or just click on the link in our show notes.
Enough about that. Let's get to today's super Lively Lewis story.
Hey friends, this is part 2 of Levi Sees Red. If you haven't listened to part 1, head over there, listen to that episode first, and then come back and join me on this one. Levi, it's okay, said Ivy, trying to reassure her brother. I felt the same way you do now when I looked into the mirror and my face was all blue. That's because of the expression feeling blue, which means someone is feeling down or sad. But everything turned out fine. Look at me now. No more blue face. She reached up and grabbed a hold of the mirror, making sure Levi didn't drop it. He started to calm down, feeling better that his sister was by his side and that she had been through all of this before. Okay, so my face looks like a giant strawberry, and that's okay, whispered Levi to himself. What do I do now, Ivy? Ivy then explained to her brother what she did when she used the mirror. She told him how she realized the color change in her face was due to her emotions and that it would probably be the best to think of each thing that made her sad over the week and try to work through each situation in her head. Trying to figure out if she could have done something different, and gotten a different outcome. Ivy tried to think of something good that came out of each situation, even though it resulted in her being sad. She also tried to see if there was maybe a miscommunication somewhere which caused the problem. Once she went through all the different situations in her head, concentrating on making each one better and figuring out what about them made her sad in the first place, the blue color on her face faded and she was left with a bunch of strategies to use the next time she felt sad. So now I'm going to sit here and think about each of the things that happened at camp that got me mad? Asked Levi. I don't know if I want to do that. I'll just be more upset. And as Levi said that, he saw his face getting redder and redder in the mirror's reflection. Levi, you have to try and calm down, urged Ivy. The mirror can't help you if you don't try and help yourself. Levi watched his face turn a brighter red, and he knew he had to do something about it. Red was one of his favorite colors, and he loved tomatoes and strawberries, but he didn't need to look like them. And more importantly, he had to learn to get control of his emotions. Ivy then suggested he take some deep breaths. You know what? Why don't we take some deep breaths with Levi? Can we do that? Take 3 big breaths? Ready, friends? Great job. Let's continue on with the story. This always works for me, Levi, said Ivy. Anytime I feel big emotions like sadness or anger, I close my eyes and take a few deep breaths. It really helps to calm your mind, and when your mind is calm, then you can think better and make choices. Levi listened to Ivy, closed his eyes, and took a few deep breaths. He could feel himself calming down, and when he opened his eyes, he noticed that the red color on his face had faded slightly. Now that you're a bit calmer, let's start with you thinking about the first thing that happened at camp that made you mad, said Ivy. That would be when I was supposed to pitch at the baseball game. I didn't get to because my counselor was being mean and didn't tell the counselor filling in for him that he promised me I could, said Levi as his face got redder. Now, Levi, you're getting all worked up again, said Ivy. I can tell you're mad because you called your counselor mean. Those are your emotions coming out in a negative way. Well, he is mean. Why wouldn't he tell the other counselor that he promised me I could pitch if he knew he wasn't going to be at the game? Grumbled Levi with a scowl on his face. You have it all wrong, said Ivy. Did you bother to ask where your counselor was before getting upset? One strategy that's good to use in situations is seeing things from another person's point of view. If you did that, you would have found out that your counselor was in the doctor's tent that day because he got stung by a bee and he's allergic to them. So he probably wasn't thinking about you pitching because I bet he was pretty scared. Ivy knew all of this because she helped out at the doctor's tent as part of a first aid badge she was working on at camp that summer. Oh, no, I had no idea that happened, said Levi. He was back the next day and I didn't even think to ask him about what happened. Because you were mad, said Ivy. Levi nodded his head. That made him feel pretty bad to know he created a story in his head about his counselor. That wasn't true. All because he was too upset to talk it out with him. He then thought how he would feel if that were him. Hey friends, do you ever find that sometimes we focus too much on what's going on in our own emotions and in our own world that we forget that people outside of that are also dealing with things? Because I know I do. It's pretty hard. But I think Ivy's making a really good point here. Levi thought a little more about the game too. Instead of shaking it off and moving on after he couldn't pitch, he let his bad mood affect how he played that day. He struck out and played poorly on the field because he let his emotions take over. Playing the way he did not only made him feel more upset, and what he was starting to realize was that he had control over the way he feels. And why would he ever choose to do something that makes him feel mad or upset? This is helpful, Ivy, but I really feel bad now. I didn't ask what was wrong with my counselor or why he missed the game, said Levi. My counselor is great, and I wish I could tell him that right now. That's great, Levi, exclaimed Ivy. You're learning. The mirror is working. Look! Levi looked in the mirror and noticed that his face didn't look quite as red anymore. He smiled a little, knowing that the next day at camp, he would go and talk with his counselor. Talking to your counselor would be great. That way you can explain how you were feeling and make sure he knows that you were thinking about him, exclaimed Ivy. Next, Levi turned his attention toward the rainy day at camp when he was so excited to play air hockey with his friends, but the table was broken. He could once again feel himself starting to get upset. But instead of letting his emotions take over, Levi closed his eyes and took a few deep breaths. Good job, Levi, whispered Ivy, cheering on her brother for working so hard. I'm thinking about the air hockey table being broken and how it made me feel, explained Levi. Why did it have to be broken? It ruined my whole plan for a fun, rainy afternoon at camp with my friends. I was really looking forward to it, and after the baseball game, I really needed something to go right. Levi then sat and thought for a minute or two before shaking his head. I think it was just a bad situation, Ivy. I don't think I can learn anything from it. And I couldn't have handled it any differently, said Levi as he stared into the mirror. I mean, it just kept getting worse. After we found out the table was broken, I just sat around and did nothing for the rest of the afternoon. Ivy was searching for something to say to Levi when a light bulb went off in her head. So you and your friends all just sat around for the rest of the afternoon and did nothing? Asked Ivy, knowing what the answer would be. Levi nodded his head and then quickly remembered something. No, they played board games, answered Levi. So you chose to sit and do nothing for the rest of the afternoon. You chose not to play with your friends, and you let your emotions win out and caused you to have a bad rest of the day, stated Ivy. It was then that the light bulb went off in Levi's head as well. He never thought of it that way. You're right, he said to Ivy. My friends all looked like they were having a great time, even though the air hockey table was broken. It should have made me feel happy for them, but instead it only made me more upset. It's a weird feeling to be mad at someone for having a good time, said Ivy, but that's exactly what happened. You were mad that they were able to move on from their disappointment after finding out the air hockey table was broken and still make the most of their afternoon. That's it exactly, said Levi. They even asked me to play with them and I said no, and I just walked off to pout and be upset. I let the whole afternoon go by and missed out on a ton of fun with my friends. I should have just realized that there were still lots of fun things to do that we could have done that afternoon. That's it, said Ivy. Just changing the way you look at a situation sometimes can really help. You could have just looked around and saw all the other options in the camp hall. Next time you're in a similar situation, you'll do that. That's really good advice, Ivy, Levi said, agreeing to his sister. Next time I'm upset or disappointed because something didn't go my way, I can look around and see what other options I have instead of letting that opportunity go by and waste my time being upset and alone. Levi smiled and took another look at himself in the mirror. He could now see that his face was just a light pink, no more tomato red. It was obvious that talking things out with Ivy was really helping. He was collecting so many good strategies to help him in the future when something popped up that could make him upset. Now, on to the last thing that made you upset, said Ivy. Levi took another deep breath and started talking about the candy pudding incident. He was just so sure his friend was going to vote for candy pudding that even right then, he still couldn't understand why he didn't. Connor voted for candy pudding with me. Why didn't Al do it too? Asked Levi. He promised he would. Well, that is one thing I don't have an answer for, said Ivy. You'd have to ask Al that question. In fact, you should have asked Al that day. Maybe his answer would have helped you to not be so upset with him. I guess you're right. I let my emotions win again, but this time I yelled at someone. Actually, 2 people. Al and one of the counselors. Wow, now that I say that out loud, this is really not like me at all, said Levi, replaying the situation in his head. Maybe you should call Al, find out why he changed his mind, said Ivy. I think it would help. Your face is still just a little red, so the mirror is letting you know that you haven't learned all you can about dealing with this emotion. Levi agreed, and he and Ivy left the treehouse to go back inside and give his friend Al a call. The phone rang only once before Al answered. Levi was surprised when he started talking to his friend, and Al seemed a little nervous. Hey, Levi, you're not calling to yell at me again, are you? Asked Al, sounding a bit unsure if he wanted to continue with the call. Oh gosh, no, exclaimed Levi. No way, not at all. The exact opposite, actually. I'm calling to apologize for yelling at you today, but also to find out why you told me you'd vote for candy pudding and then switched at the last minute. First, thanks for apologizing. And second, if I'm being totally honest, I only said I'd vote for candy pudding because when you asked me, you seemed kind of mad and I didn't want to upset you anymore, replied Al. Levi couldn't believe what he was hearing. He didn't think he seemed upset or mad to other people when he was talking to Al. He couldn't believe how his emotions could affect his interactions with other people. Until then, Levi thought his emotions really only affected him. I'm really sorry, said Levi. It's okay. I know you're sorry, and we all get mad and upset from time to time, said Al. It's just that you know how much I love s'mores, and I haven't been able to eat them all summer because of my braces. Then I told just the other day that I was super excited to choose s'mores for a snack when our group got the chance because I got my braces taken off yesterday afternoon. Wow, I totally forgot about that, said Levi. I'm sorry, I should have just asked you why you voted for s'mores. Then I could have avoided being upset with you and we could have just enjoyed our s'mores together. Even though they're no candy pudding, s'mores are still pretty delicious. I know, I was surprised you didn't eat one today, said Al. I was just so upset because of a bunch of things that happened that week that I wasn't even hungry. Not even for an ooey gooey, chocolatey, marshmallowy s'more, said Levi. Weird how your emotions can change your whole day. That's why in the future, I'm going to remember a really good piece of advice I heard. You can't let your emotions control you. You have to control your emotions. Levi looked at Ivy as he said that and gave her a big smile, thanking her for the great advice. Al and Levi talked for another minute and said they would go canoeing the next day at camp, and both looked forward to having a great rest of the summer together. Now, that was a helpful phone call, said Ivy as she held the mirror up to Levi's one last time so he could see that his face was back to its normal color. No more tomato face! No more tomato face, giggled Levi. Thank you so much, Ivy. This mirror and your advice helped me so much to work through my emotions. Tomorrow at camp will be a whole new day. I have a few other people that I have to apologize to, and then moving forward, I'll be able to use everything I learned with you to better manage my emotions when something gets me upset. That's so great to hear, Levi, said Ivy, giving her brother a hug. And the next person I'd like to apologize to after Al is Dad, said Levi. I wasn't acting too nice when I got home this afternoon. Let's go find him. Ivy could not have been happier. She took her mirror, put it back in her room, ready to be used again if she or Levi needed it. Levi, Ivy, called their dad from the kitchen. Come over here. I have a snack for you. Once they walked into the kitchen, Levi gave his dad a big hug and apologized for the way he acted when he got home. He told his dad what a great help Ivy was and how he talked about what made him mad at camp and discovered ways to deal with similar situations better in the future. Ivy really helped me see how important it is to communicate with others when you're upset, instead of assuming you know their situation, said Levi. She taught me how emotions can change the way you act and even affect other people. And she taught me it's okay to have a strong emotion, but we have to control them and not let them control us. That's some really good advice, Ivy, said her dad. Thank you for helping Levi so much. No problem, Dad, said Ivy, giving Levi a smile. I guess you can say when it comes to dealing with my emotions, I'm kind of magic. Levi told his dad how he planned to go to camp the next day and apologized to everyone he interacted with when he was upset over the last few days. I think that's a great idea, said Levi's dad, so proud of the way his son was handling the situation and taking responsibility for the way he acted. Being mad or sad or upset about something isn't wrong, but sometimes the way we react to those emotions can be. Levi and Ivy's dad knew his kids would figure out a way to work through these emotions. So while they talked, he prepared a little something, a tasty treat to celebrate Levi getting back to his usual happy and positive self. Something he knew Levi would really appreciate. I have a surprise for you two, said Levi and Ivy's dad. You did a lot of good work just now, and I bet you both worked up a little appetite. How about some... Is that candy pudding? Exclaimed Levi with a huge smile on his face. It is. Enjoy, said Levi's dad, placing a bowl of pudding in front of each of his kids and a few different candy toppings for them to choose from to go on top. That day, Levi learned how powerful your emotions can be, how they can affect you and others around you, and how it is perfectly okay to have them. Because sometimes people get mad, sometimes people get sad, but it is important that no matter what you're feeling, you try to work out those problems and learn from it. You can do this by talking with family or friends or with the person who's involved in the situation. Communication is key, and it always helps to be honest with yourself and others. By developing strategies to help deal with big emotions, you can potentially turn a negative situation into a positive one. So the next day at camp, Levi played with Connor and Al and apologized to his friends who he got mad at after the air hockey table was broken. He played baseball and volleyball, he ate snacks and canoed on the lake. He also apologized to the counselor that wrote him up for yelling at Al and checked on his counselors to make sure he was okay after his bee sting. That summer, Levi learned that he would have to deal with his big emotions all the time, and that's okay. He learned that being aware of his emotions, taking control of them, and seeing things from another person's point of view are all very important. And he learned that apologizing when he let his emotions guide his actions made him feel better because it was the right thing to do. But working through a situation that made him mad before he did something he had to apologize for, now that made him feel even better. Thanks for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed the story and learned a little something too.
And since we know everyone has their own story, we'd love to hear yours.
If you have an idea for a Lively Lewis story, leave a comment on our Apple Podcast review page with 5 stars, your idea, and your little one's name.
Then maybe our next adventure will be with you.
Until our next Storytime Hangout.
Thanks for listening. We can't wait to share another fun Lively Lewis story with you.